A FAM production. Furniture and Mattress. FAM.news.
Brooklyn Bedding, Helix, Bear, and probably some other names that you haven't heard of yet. The man that connects the threads between all of them, the product of Southeast Montana, Mr. John Merwin, the CEO of Brooklyn Bedding, is on the show today. The Dos Marcos show begins right now. Be honest, how much do you spend each year on product photography?
Aperture's the answer, Kinsley.
Products and more products and vignettes and tens of thousands of dollars in reshoots. I mean, the reshoots. And then it doesn't look consistent.
Aperture is the answer.
Look, the world's changed a lot. And one of the good changes is the tech driving Aperture.
Aperture is the answer.
All right, Quinn, you don't have to say Aperture is the answer anymore. So why don't you go ahead and tell them why?
Because it's the only tech company that Williams-Sonoma ever bought. And for good reason, Kinsley. They had the same problems with product photography, and now they don't. And now you won't.
Let's say you need a mattress photo. Boom. Place that beautiful bed inside Aperture's nifty 20 by 20 beauty box. Press a button, and the Aperture machine does all of the rest. All the lighting and cropping and shadows, all of it. And better yet, once you need a different background or different lighting, no reshoots. Your visual factory in a box does all the work.
And you know what? You save some money, you save some time, and you create product photography that can move at the speed of your ideas. Start today at outwardinc.com and tell them Dos Marcos sent you.
Because why? Aperture's the answer.
Welcome to the Dos Marcos Show with Mark Kinsley and Mark Quinn, where mattress and furniture leaders gather to grow, get the inside scoop, tell stories, and take tequila shots.
Uno, dos, tequila!
Welcome aboard. Here's your passport to a planet filled with the mattress industry's brightest minds and biggest ideas. The galaxy's greatest mattress podcast has liftoff in 3, 2, 1.
It is the Dos Marcos Show. I'm Mark Kinsley. This is Mark Quinn. And on the show today, Mr. John Merwin. John, welcome. Now, I teed it up by saying you're from Southeast Montana, but you're now located in Phoenix in a monster of a factory serving the mattress industry. For those who don't know, Mr. John Merwin, tell us about yourself. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Grew up in, like you said, Southeast Montana, a little town called Baker, Montana, town of 1,800. Went to school and went to college, wrestled a couple years in college and couldn't make weight anymore. So decided, I was going down the path of, I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. And my brother is 9 years older than me. And he was down in the Phoenix area. And he started selling mattresses out of a Wonder Bread truck, believe it or not. And so, his wife cut hair. He bought a little salon and quickly realized he wasn't going to make any money, running a beauty salon. And so he would go to an auction and he would buy, furniture and mattresses. And then he'd put it in his garage and he'd sell it out of his garage. Well, then go back to the auctioneer. The auctioneer took a liking to him and he's like, hey, you should focus on mattresses. I can get you truckloads of mattresses. And so he kind of took his advice, and this is right when cell phones came out. So he had a bag phone and then he wanted to get a box truck and he bought a Wonder Bread truck. And so he would drive around Southeast Mesa and he would place ads in the Penny Saver. And this is pre-internet really. And, he'd take a call on his bag phone and it'd be like, hey, I'm calling about your mattress. And he's like, well, where are you located? And they'd tell him, and he'd say, you know what? I just finished a delivery. He was always 15 to 20 minutes away. And he's, I'm 15, 20 minutes away. I'll just drive over and show you what I have. And so he'd drive over there and then he'd start sloughing beds off on the driveway, and then they'd buy it and he'd go. And he'd go back, 2 weeks later to the auctioneer to buy inventory. And the guy's like, how are you selling these beds? And he's like, I'm driving around, placing ads. And he's like, that's ridiculous. You need to get a store. He's like, you need the customers coming to you. And so he took his advice and rented a storefront in Mesa. And he was about 9 months into it. And I had just gotten engaged to my high school sweetheart up in Montana. And he called up and he's like, what are your plans? And I'm like, well, like I said, I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. He's like, after you get married, why don't you move down to Arizona? And he's like, I got this little mattress gig going on, and, you know, I want to open up another store, and, you know, you can run a store, I'll run a store. He's like, you know, we'll get really big. You know, I think we can get to 4 stores. And so I hung up and talked to my fiance at the time. And, you know, we, like I said, we grew up in a town of 1,800 people. And so it sounded kind of exciting. We're like, yeah, let's do it. And so we got married. Very next week, we loaded up a U-Haul and drove down to Arizona and haven't looked back since. So, you know, how we, you know, we had stores and we were liquidators. So we were buying scratch and dent closeouts, overstocks. And what it turned out, what we were buying was this auctioneer had an inside track with Montgomery Wards. I don't know if you guys remember Montgomery Wards.
Oh, Quinn remembers Montgomery Wards for a very special reason. Quinn, you want to tell him?
Well, my father was the regional VP of merchandising, and then my wife, John, I was 28. I walked into Montgomery Ward. I just started with Serta and calling on Sam's Club as one account, and the other account was Montgomery Ward's. We were selling them $32 million worth of bedding. They were about to file Chapter 11. I walk into the department, and there is this gorgeous, blonde, younger, beautiful assistant buyer who is now my wife. So I got that out of the deal.
And she's another amazing product of Montana.
That's, well, sure. Hey, there's good people there. Sorry, my light shut off. So that's crazy. So that's right when they filed Chapter 11, right?
Yes, exactly right.
Okay, so we're R&S Mattress is probably 4 years into business. And we're surviving off of all the as-is product that we're buying from Montgomery.
I bet there's a lot of Serta in there, so you're welcome, John.
Dude, there's tons of Serta. And, you know, they'd deliver it and they'd get a little scuff on it and boom, it'd go in the trailer and then we would buy it for, you know, pennies on the dollar. And so when you're buying, you know, this kind of goes into the history of how we started making beds, but when you're buying liquidated product, you don't tell them, you know, we could never say, hey, we want box springs, we want twins, we want fulls. And so there was a segment of our selection that we just wouldn't get. So we went to a small local manufacturer here in town called Quality Bedding, and we would buy we would supplement from them. So we would buy box springs and twins and fulls, and just to, you know, customers come in and looking for a twin guest bed or, you know, whatever it was that we couldn't get liquidated, we buy from them. So Wards goes bankrupt and they tell us about it, and we have about 6 months. And I think at that time we had 5 retail stores. And, you know, my brother and I were talking and we're kind of freaking out. We're like, what are we going to do? You know, where are we going to get product? How are we going to stay in business? And so, you know, we're like, well, you know, let's go knock on the doors let's go knock on Serta's door and Sealy's door and Simmons' door. So we go, you know, Phoenix has a lot of mattress factories. And so we go and we start knocking on the doors locally, and sure enough, they wanted to sell their as-is product. And so after Wards is out of the picture, and we start buying, you know, as-is, crazy quilts, you know, whatever we can get our hands on, we wanted to buy. And we start buying from Sealy, and, you know, we buy a little bit from Simmons. Serta never really, we couldn't crack that nut right away. And so it was Sealy and Simmons mostly, but so we're back in business, right? We're buying liquidated product, and we're probably 6 months into it, and you get to know the plant manager a little bit, and, you know, we're in looking at the inventory, you know, looking at the finished goods, and over in the corner is, you know, some springs and some foam and, you know, a couple rolls of tick, and it's, you know, it's like, hey, what is all that stuff? You know, it just looked like it didn't belong. He's like, oh, that's obsolete material. It's, you know, someone changed their specs, and, you know, we kind of got stuck with it. I'm like, well, what are you going to do with it? And he's like, well, if we can't find anyone to buy it, we're probably just going to scrap it. And I'm like, how much you want for it? And, you know, he's like, I don't know, you know, shoot me an offer. And so shoot him an offer, and he's like, yeah, take it. I'm like, okay, great. We load all this stuff up on our truck. We had a nicer truck. It wasn't a Wonder Bread truck anymore, but we had a little bit nicer truck. And immediately we take this over to Quality Bedding and grab the guy at Quality Bedding. We're like, hey, you got to come see what we got. and open up the doors. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do with this? I'm like, make beds out of it. I'm like, we're liquidators. We don't care what it looks like. We'll sell it. Every bed we sold was one of a kind. So we would, we kind of joke about it. Our retail stores, we would go between, like a lube shop and a vape shop. That's kind of where the real estate that we were looking for, big, cheap, and then we would just jam it full of mattresses. So we go to Quality Bedding and tell them, hey, we got some springs here, we want some foam, we got some fabric, make some beds out of it and just give me a good deal. That's all it was about at that time was, I want to buy it for $20. I want to sell it for $100, And so he looked at it and he's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to charge you. And he's like, I'm not going to do it. And it's like, okay. So we take that stuff back to our little warehouse and it's like lost a couple $100, whatever. And, 2 months later, back in Sealy's offices trying to buy some product. And this time the guy goes, hey, you see those finished goods you want over there? It's like, yeah. I said, well, before I sell you those, you have to buy all this stuff. And you look over there and he's got a ton more raw materials, excess raw materials that he wanted to get rid of. And it's like, man, this guy's going to kind of strong arm us that, we have to buy all of his crap before we can actually get the product that we want. And it was like, well, we're like, maybe let's figure out how to build mattresses. And so it was like, you're looking around and you're like, hey, can you show me how to build a mattress? Like, how are you guys doing it? And he's like, yeah, come over and look at this equipment. And so pretty soon I'm looking at a tape edge machine. We're looking at flange machines, quilting machines. And you remember a couple names and get home. And it was no more than probably a month later, we bought our first sewing machine and off we went. And so for the longest time, we were the liquidators. We in town, we started getting calls from all the different factories, Tick and Springs and one time Sealy at one time was making their own coils and, they had a run of like 10,000 units that were a half-inch short and they called us up and, I bought them for like $5 a unit or something like that. So that, we became known as the guys that would, hey, call these guys in Phoenix. They'll buy anything and they'll pay cash. And so that, we just kept adding retail stores. But, the beautiful part about that was I had my own distribution, right? So, we would just, we'd get enough fabric to build 50 beds and we build 50 beds and then we would send it out to our stores and trained our guys on how to sell it and then they would sell it. And all the while we're still buying, as is product from Serta, Sealy, Simmons, we would buy some stuff from Bloomingdale's and kind of doing that. And it was all under the brand of R&S Mattress. And so fast forward, like I said, I think we're at 20, 25 stores and my wife was a very early e-commerce, buyer and shopper. And so one night in bed, we're sitting there and she's like, hey, look at this mattress. And she was on Overstock and there's this mattress in a box and memory foam. And it was, pretty low price. And I'm like, well, buy that thing. And she buys it and it comes to my house and I look at this thing and I'm like, I was amazed. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I throw it in my truck. I take it up to the factory. We open it up and this thing comes back. And it was the first time I'd ever seen a bed in the box. I'm like, and I'm like, I want to do this. I want to figure out how to put a bed in the box. And so I start calling around and, I think I had gone to one ISPA show and, I'd starting to, meet different people and different things like that. So I start calling around to the different guys I know in the industry and I'm like, hey, how do we get these beds? And at that time, Sleep Innovations was definitely doing it. There were some other guys that were doing it, but for the most part, it was kind of imported. And so I get a hold of a guy and I tell him what I want to do. And he's like, well, do you want to go to China? He's like, we can just we'll fly to China and I'll take you on a tour of these factories and and you can build some beds. And so 3 weeks later, we're on a plane to China. I spent 2 weeks in China, toured a bunch of factories, watching these guys build beds, and it's it's no different than what I was doing. They had an old press, but except they would press it, roll it up by hand, and tape it up, and throw it in a box. And so I ordered 2 or 3 containers and of mattresses. I designed some mattresses there and ordered them and brought them in and put them online. I'm like, all right, I'm going to sell beds online. This is going to be great. And I mean, we didn't sell a single bed. And the whole time I've been investing all this, money and equipment, and I'm like, God, I do not want to import. I want to be able to do this myself. So I kept looking around, and Leggett had just bought Technomac, or had just done a partnership with Technomac, and I had already bought a quilter, and so my Leggett guy's like, hey, we have a roll pack machine in Italy, and I'm like, well, I want to go look at it. I go look at it, and took a second on my house and bought this roll pack machine for like $125,000 and bring it in, set it up, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be able to build a bed in the box. And so I built a couple different beds, and we put a bed on Amazon, and kind of just forgot about it and didn't sell anything. And finally, after like 6 months, for whatever reason, the pictures were terrible. I know nothing about marketing. I'm not a marketing guy, and so I took a picture in the back of the factory, and it just wasn't good. And finally, we sell a bed. And so it was like, oh, this is great. So we build it and run it through our Technomac that was kind of just sitting there, and put it in a box and run it down to the FedEx station, ship it. And, I'm driving back to the factory. I'm like, this is awesome. I looked at Amazon, and this is just another retail store. It's an online retail store. And so another day goes by, and we sell another one, and then we sold another one, and pretty soon we start getting a couple of reviews, and pretty soon it's like, hey, our Amazon business is the equivalent of our best store right now. And that was after like 3 or 4 months, and like, this is great. And so, we're kind of plodding along, and we're still R&S Mattress Liquidators, and the brand I put on Amazon was Dream Foam Bedding. For whatever reason, I wanted a different brand, and I get a call from someone at Amazon, and it's someone in their marketing department. They say, hey, we've been following your store, and you guys are doing a really good job, getting great reviews. And we'd like to do a little marketing piece on you. I said, okay. So they interviewed me, and, they got a picture, and they said, now next Tuesday, this piece is going to run on our mattress page, and you're probably going to see a nice lift of business. And then after that, there'll be a link, and then it'll go away. I'm like, okay. So I wake up Tuesday morning to a phone call from my plant manager, and he's like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know what. He's like, Amazon. It was 7:30 in the morning. He's like, we've already had more orders than we've ever had. I said, well, yeah, I told you they were going to run this piece. They said it was going to be, they said we'd get a lift. And so I log on. I'm like, holy cow, that's crazy. And then I'm like, I got to see where this is. So I log on to Amazon.com, and on the homepage of Amazon.com, above the fold, is a picture of me in a heading that says, Dream Foam gets your bed just right. And then you could click on it, and you could read the story. And then after the story, you could click on our store, and you could go to our store, and there's our mattress. And at that time, we had one mattress. And so that day was phenomenal. And then Wednesday was pretty good, and then it just tailed off. And like they said, it was gone. So next Tuesday, about 7 o'clock, I get a call from my plant manager again. He's like, hey, it's happening again. I'm like, what? And he's like, Amazon. And I'm like, roll out of bed, I get on my computer, go to Amazon.com. Sure enough, there's that same ad, and he's like, well, they said they were only going to run it once, right? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. He's like, well, maybe they made a mistake. He's like, are you going to call them? I'm like, hell no, I'm not going to call them. Like, maybe they did make a mistake. I don't know. And so every Tuesday, for like 8 months, they ran my ad, and I never talked to anyone. I never called anyone. And so it's every Tuesday, boom. And it's getting so busy that, I was taking the phone calls and then I'm trying to build the beds in the factory and I'm trying to run these retail stores. And so finally I'm like, I need to hire, I need to bring a guy in to help me. So I bring in a guy to start taking the phone calls and helping to sell beds. And I'm listening to him sell a bed and he doesn't sell a bed. So this is like 2 or 3 weeks later and I go into his office. I'm like, hey, what happened? I'm like, that sounded like it was, you were going to sell it. He's like, well, she doesn't want a 12-inch bed. She wants a 10-inch memory foam bed. I'm like, okay. And he's like, well, I'm like, we got tons of 10-inch memory foam beds in the back of the factory. He's like, we don't have any on Amazon. And we only had one bed. And I'm like, you call her up right now and you tell her by the end of the day, there'll be a 10-inch memory foam mattress on Amazon. And so I go in the back and I build one. I take a couple pictures, I launch this bed on Amazon. And sure enough, he calls her back and she buys it. So it was at that point that I'm like, shoot, man, we need a bigger selection. So then I built a selection. I built out a line of memory foam beds. I built out a line of latex beds. I built out a line of foam beds. And about this time is when Tuck the Needle comes along and Casper comes along. And, these guys are selling the story of, we've built the one bed that's perfect for everybody. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's ridiculous. I'm selling 20 beds on Amazon and I'm selling tons of them. Like one bed, there's no way. And so I was kind of stubborn and just couldn't comprehend what they were doing. But the timing of when they came in and started doing that, it was game changing for everybody. And, I sat there for, we were building our business on Amazon, and the whole time that I'm doing that, we're still in liquidation business. And then they came along and I'm like, hey, we need to build a brand. And that's when, my second daughter's name is Brooklyn. And, we were kind of tossing around some different brand names, and that's where Brooklyn Bedding came from. And boom, there we went. I told you I was long-winded. So
John, this is such a great story, and there's so much backstory to it that I knew nothing about, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't know about. Go back, and I want to fill in a couple of key questions. So whenever you're talking about that first Tuesday when the story went up on Amazon, what year was that? Because I was thinking about that in relationship to some of the single mattress, mattress in a box players that started pushing, Tuck the Needle probably around 2012.
Yeah, so it was like 2010 or 11, right around there. Because it was before Tuck the Needle. Tuck the Needle started on Amazon with like a little 5-inch futon, and then kind of went down the path that they went. But it was like 2010, 2011, and I still keep it, but I don't know if you guys can see this, but here's the little, they sent me this after the 9 months, and I don't know if you can see it, but it says Dream Foam Gets Your Bed. But this was the little heading, and on the homepage of Amazon above the fold, right? This was before Amazon they were selling other things, obviously, but they weren't charging. Now they have co-op fees, and to get a heading like that, I don't know how much you would have to spend, but at the end of that 9 months, the lady called me and I said, hey, I just got to ask, you guys said that you're only going to run this for 1 week. How come you kept running it? And she said, well, to be perfectly honest with you, we would always highlight authors. We would highlight, authors that had just wrote a book, and so we would put them on that heading, and then they would sell a book for, $14.99, and Amazon would take their, whatever cut they were getting. And she said, we ran your ad, and all of a sudden we're selling $600 mattresses. We're selling as many $600 mattresses as we were selling, $15 books. And, so, the return on that ad, that ad placement was phenomenal for me. And then I kept adding SKUs. And so I just kept adding selection, and then it just, I would keep track of the Amazon rankings, and when at the end of that 9 months, of the top 100 beds on Amazon, I had 25 of them. And in the top 100, I think I had like 12 or 13 of them. And so, we were doing a tremendous amount of volume. At least back then, to us, it was a tremendous amount of volume. And at that time, we were in like 4 different buildings because we're still liquidation. I'm buying different things from everyone, and I'm trying to get as vertical as possible. And this is, I'm sorry, but it's a crazy long story on how we got to where we got. So we would buy liquidation stuff. And so then I got a call from FXI had a facility in Phoenix, and they would call and they'd be like, "Hey, we have some foam. It's a little out of spec. So-and-so Serta doesn't want it. Do you want it?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I want it." And he's like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Well, you got to cut it for me." He's like, "No, I'm not cutting it." He's like, "If you want to buy this stuff, you got to buy buns." I'm like, "Well, I don't know how to cut foam." And, he's like, "Well, just come over here and I'll show you how we do it." And so I go over and he takes me back there, and he's like, "You got to buy a horizontal saw and you got to buy a vertical saw." He's like, "You should be able to find them pretty cheap, and here's how you do it." And so boom, now we're cutting foam, and, we start bringing in buns and we start cutting foam. So every step along the way, we would learn how to build beds, and that was us cutting foam. And then it was, I've always wanted to get as vertical as possible. And so, I launched a line with a big online retailer, and I sat down with our coil provider and said, "Hey, I really want this business. Here's my margins. Here's where we're at. I need you guys to give me a good deal." They came in and gave me what I thought was a good deal, and we launched this business, and boom, we take off, and we're doing well. And, no more than like 2 months later, they walk in the door with a, 12% price increase. I'm like, "Hey, I can't do that. I just launched this program and I can't do that." And they're like, "Well, I'm like, "You know what? I want to figure out how to build my own coils." And I had looked at some equipment, and so 6 months later, I had some coiling equipment, and I took my lumps, for the first couple of years on trying to figure it out. I bought the wrong equipment, but I just kept at it. And so now today, we build 100% of the coils that we use. We don't outsource that anywhere. And same.
Yeah, no, I want to keep going there, right? Because I want to bring this into present day. And so you've done so much, Helix and Bear and all of those things. Like, where are you today? And how did you kind of some of the more recent decisions? I'm just curious. And by the way, Kinsley, isn't his story so interesting? Because really what he just told us was Amazon literally helped him get into this business, but in a really big way, he kind of helped Amazon get into the mattress business is the takeaway I got from that story, because they were learning in parallel with him. So I love that part. I mean, that's a crazy story. I love that. But anyway, back to my question. So just current day, right? So I see this theme of you seeing opportunities and jumping on them quickly and being vertical in your manufacturing process, and you're kind of connecting dots. But now you've made some acquisitions and you've grown into this very modern company. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of why you've kind of come to where you are right now?
Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, we have our sights set on, we want to be the largest D2C, mattress player out there. The space is so large, and, we're still just a little tiny piece of it. And so when all these bed in the box companies, launched and they, they were all over the place. And in the back of my head the whole time, I'm like, there's going to have to be some consolidation that, they're just not going to all be able to make it. They built good brands that, they're able to sell product. But I just always felt like that there's going to need to be, a pullback and some shrinking. And so, pre-COVID, we're growing out of our facility and I wanted to build this big, huge facility. I wanted to pour foam and the coils. I wanted to put it everywhere. Every factory that I've toured outside of the U.S., they pour their own foam. They make their own springs. I mean, a lot of them even make their own fabric, and that doesn't happen here. And I don't get it. And so, I would look at it and be like, I want to control my own destiny. I want to. And so, you would always hear from the foamers, oh, you can't get a permit. You can't do this, you can't do that. And so finally, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to try to do it. And that's what we did. And so long-winded again, but, I get, pre-COVID, before COVID hits March of 2020, I am, a week away from signing construction docs on this new 650,000 square foot facility, pouring foam. COVID hits. We're kind of freaking out. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, the first 8 days, 10 days of the world shutting down, I mean, it was bad. It was bad online. It was bad retail. It was bad everywhere. Well, after that 10 days and everyone was home, and then they realized that the world wasn't going to end and they were stuck at home, then pretty soon our online sales started lifting and it was really good for the online business. And so then I'm like, you know what? We got to build this factory. And so I signed the papers and we got started on that factory. And that was, we get into the supply chain mess and the coils and the non-woven issues. Everyone couldn't get their hands on non-woven, which is needed to make pocketed coils. And I was building my own coils at the time. And I've always, because of my history, I've always been heavy inventory. And so, I saw kind of the issue with the non-woven and, I'm ordering, container after container of non-woven. And what I got into was, no one had coils. Well, I had coils and I got a call. I know the Helix guys and I sent a text off to Jerry and I said, hey, how are things going? I imagine you guys are pretty busy. And he's like, we're really busy. He's like, but we can't get product. And I had a little bit of capacity and I had coils. And so I text him back. I'm like, hey, I would love an opportunity to build some beds for you. I'm building my own coils. I have capacity. I could probably get you, I can't remember. I threw him out a number of what I could get him a week. And it wasn't more than 2 minutes and my phone's ringing and he calls me and he's like, you have coils? I'm like, yeah, I'm making my own coils. And so he's like, well, you think you could build beds? Yeah, I can build beds. And so 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, he's in the factory and we're building beds and prototyping stuff. And, it was probably 3.5 weeks later, we're building beds for him and trying to get them out of their supply chain mess. And I've known Jerry and Christian and Adam and those guys and we've all, we see each other at market and different things like that. And, you know how those things are. You get sitting next to guys and you're like, hey, what do you think if we, if there was some consolidation or, I think it's got to happen or, it's got this and that. And after, that happened with the supply chain and we got hooked back up with Helix, that's when those conversations started. And then we ran a process and boom, here we are today. So, this new facility it's a beautiful building. And my goal when I built it was I wanted to, I said, I want to build 3,500 to 4,000 pieces a day. And I want to sell those straight to the consumer. And, I want these to be D2C. And so when you start running that math, at an average unit price and, 3,500 beds and you start running that math and, you come to a big number. That's a big facility. And so, where we're at today is, that's what we're trying to do. And as we create, the demand, I think that we're going to be able to drive traffic for retailers also. And we're going to be able to put our product into some retailers, and we're going to drive traffic for them. You know, yes, we do want to sell it online, but we're very happy selling it in someone else's store and letting them take the customer as well. So we're just starting down that path. I think you'll probably hear a lot more from us at the January market. But we did the Helix and Brooklyn Bedding, combined and merged, and then 4 months later we added on Bear. So we've been busy, integrating everything and just trying to learn from each other, best practices, and that's where we're at today.
All right, John, I got some questions about the D2C space, because it has been just this shape-shifting beast that has become such a huge part of the industry. And clearly, we're talking to one of the early pioneers who got into the space, obviously through the vehicle of Amazon, and then through becoming vertical and servicing other manufacturers and building your own brands. And now you've got Brooklyn Bedding, and you've got Helix as part of the family, and Bear as part of the family, and you have several retail stores in the Phoenix area. Is that right? Under the Brooklyn Bedding banner?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah, we have 16 stores in the Phoenix market.
Okay, so I'm going to go back in time for a minute, and I want to connect the dots between something that I've noticed. Maybe you can give us some perspective on, because I think this is going to be a good insight just in terms of where the industry is at. I remember years ago when I was at Leggett, I met Jamie Diamondstein, and of course, Jamie was part of starting Lisa.
Yep.
And then, there was Lisa, there was Tuft and Needle and Casper, and then eventually Purple came along. And now I don't see in the online space as much visibility around brands like Lisa. And, from time to time, I'll see Helix. I don't see as much Bear. I talk to the people who are doing, spending hundreds of millions of dollars in online advertising to get in front of the consumer to sell direct. And they're telling me now that it's anywhere between $300 and $350 to acquire a customer online. How are you approaching that space in terms of deploying ad spend? How do you show up in front of consumers whenever somebody might be outspending you? What does that landscape look like these days?
Yeah, I would say, I feel like that it goes back to wanting to be as vertical as possible, right? And so I don't want to be the cheapest guy, but I want to be the low cost provider, right? I feel like there isn't anyone out there in the manufacturing space that can build a bed, as cost efficiently as I can. And so what that does is that gives us a little bit more margin, and we can go out and we can afford to acquire that customer. And that's what we when we brought Helix on, the Helix team is phenomenal. I mean, it was such a perfect combination in the sense that, we were never, very heavily marketing driven. And they were, I'm a factory guy. I love to be in the back of the factory. I love to build the product. I love to buy equipment. I mean, you come check this place out and everything is inside of, almost 5 years new. Right. And so that's where I found out that's where I'm valuable, and that's where I need to be. And so when we combine these companies, I'm still the CEO, but, Adam, Christian, Jerry, I mentioned Tim Dilworth, my COO. I mean, these are the guys that are running this thing, and they're phenomenal marketers. They're really good at what they do. And so, I feel like, so I don't know if I answered your question, but I feel like, we can still be profitable and go out and acquire customers. And I think that's what's happened. That's why you don't see these brands is, it's gotten a lot tougher to get in front of the customer. And, whether the margin isn't there for them or, I'm not 100% sure, but, that would be my guess. I used to bang heads with Tuft and Needle here locally. And I have the utmost respect for what JT and Dahi and the team that they had, what they built. I mean, they were kicking my butt. Those guys, and I haven't seen JT or Dahi for quite a while, but I would see him at market and we were cordial and everything. But I'm not kidding you. I had a store in Phoenix, right? And there was a billboard directly above my store. And I did billboards in town. And I did billboards before they did billboards, right? But the company, they would never, there's some law or something, they wouldn't let me buy that billboard directly above my store. So Tuck the Needle goes in and buys that billboard, and they put, this was during their mattress stores are greedy, buy TN.com. And I'm cruising down, I'm going to look at one of my stores, and I'm driving by that store, and I look up and I almost wrecked my car. I'm like, these guys, are you kidding me? And
this is a podcast, John. You can let all that go. It's okay.
I can say,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
You got to be shitting me. And it turned out, though, that it actually, at that store, when we started looking at the metrics, it actually boosted. So I think that, because it said mattress right above us, and then it kind of, it was right down below us. But when that billboard was up, our store performed a little bit better there. So it worked, in the end, it worked out. But yeah, and, SSB came and bought Tuck the Needle and, kind of took them down to, they kind of lost a little bit of their messaging on the whole mattress stores are greedy and, different things like that. But, yeah, the space is so interesting to me, and I love being in it.
And John, I think you did answer my question, because you mapped it back to kind of one of your main messages, which was be as vertical as possible. And so when I was asking about how do you afford to compete in that space, I mean, obviously how you afford to do it is you got to have the money, and the way that you are funding that part of your business, which is a significant part of your business, is by being vertical, by increasing your margin enough so that you can deploy that spend to get in front of the consumers. And I'm sure, if you're shopping for a mattress and you go online, I mean, those are the signals that somebody sends off that you're in the market for a mattress. So I'm sure the marketing ninjas like, Tim and the Helix team and the Bear team and the Brooklyn Bedding team, they're looking at in-market shoppers. So it's not going to show up to the general public. So it's a much more surgical spend.
Yes, for sure. Yep. They're very, very sophisticated in what they do and how they go after customers.
John, I have one more question in the sensitivity of time. Where do you see the industry going, right? You're brick and mortar, you're direct to consumer. Like, what's your view of it? Where does this all shake out? Like, balance of like what's being done online versus brick and mortar. What's your thinking there? Yeah,
I've always felt, the industry is, everyone's trying to get their hands around, how much is being done online. And I've always felt that, the number that they throw out there is always off 10 to 15%. I think the number they throw out there is always low. I think everyone understands it now, but certainly 4 to 5 years ago, the industry struggled to grasp how much was being done online. So, look, I think that it's going to continue to grow. And so, there's always going to be a segment that want to shop, but, we're looking at, like an omni-channel experience that we can try to build. My wife doesn't buy anything in a store anymore. Can't stand going in a store. My kids, I have a 20 and an 18-year-old, they don't buy anything in the store. So, the really good retailers are doing a great job of creating experiences where you walk in and you're seeing great product and you're being taken through a journey that they like. And so it's, I think it's going to, I think it's going to be a mix, but, obviously the facility that we built and where we're going, we think that the online space is going to continue to grow for sure.
John, have you seen, I don't know what your placement looks like at retail right now among your family of brands, but have you seen a lift in online sales within a certain radius of a store whenever either you open that store or whenever a product's placed? So for example, right now today, if you plop down a Helix inside of a store in St. Louis, would you see a lift within a certain radius of that store with online sales?
Yep. So I would say that we're our retail footprint is so small, right? And this is when I say, in January, I think you'll definitely hear some more from us. But the very first test we did was we put Helix in the Brooklyn bedding stores. And, and then we started to do it, a little bit of marketing. And what we found was, for sure, Helix was driving traffic into our retail stores. And so, our sales guys loved it. And, we didn't, when you look at, we don't feel like it's affected our online sales at all. And in the market, we're going after that segment of customers that want to go in and touch it and feel it. So I guess Quinn, to go back to your question, there's always going to be customers that are going to go in and feel it. And if they can't go in and feel it, then they're not going to buy your product. And so, we would like to expand our retail footprint and hopefully we can do that. But yeah.
And one of the things that I've heard to kind of shift that question a little bit was, whenever these online brands have made it into brick and mortar, then, maybe somebody's coming into that brick and mortar store and they get exposed to that brand for the first time. They leave the store and then go buy it online directly from that website. And I've heard numbers around like, hey, if we put our product in a store for the first time in like a new neighborhood, we were seeing online sales in that neighborhood, online sales go up by like 30% because there's that first exposure effect. But people still wanted to, just leave and have it shipped to their house.
Well, we all know that's not very beneficial for the retailer, right? And so, hopefully, when we make this push and if we are fortunate enough to get slotted into some retailers' floors, if that is happening, we need when we're sitting looking at doing this, and we need our retailers to be successful, right? I know what it takes to run a store and the cost of the store and the sales guy. And so, our hope is that doesn't happen if we get slotted because, you drive traffic into a retailer store, I want that retailer to make the sale.
Well, John, I think there's an opportunity here. Okay. So obviously there's a lot of opportunity in the retail space, for businesses like yours. But as I go back and I think about the genesis, the origin story of Brooklyn Bedding, you and your brother, what your brother was doing in Phoenix before you and your wife got married and moved down to Phoenix.
Yeah.
He was selling beds out of a Wonder Bread truck. I think there's an opportunity for a brand called Wonder Bed, not Wonder Bread.
Hey, maybe. I might actually own that website. I should check it out.
You better buy that .com real quickly, right?
Yeah.
If you looked at my GoDaddy account and seen all the stupid website names that I own right now, anything with mattress in it, I probably own it. It's ridiculous.
Hey, John, I've got a final question for you in the interest, back to my comment about interest of time. We've kept you so long. But what is if you look at the industry you're in, right, and all the players and all the stuff that's happened over time, what is your hope for this industry?
Yeah, I want the good, obviously I want everyone to be successful. And there's certain brands out there that you look at them and you're like, they've built a great brand. They've done a great job. And so, I want those guys to be successful. And then, the hope is, just maybe a little more transparency into the product and different things like that. But, I've gone by the motto of, never burn a bridge, and you never know what's going to happen in the industry. So that's kind of where I've
sure is a small industry and a good one to be a part of. And Quinn and I always try to anchor ourselves around the idea that we're really helping people get a better night's sleep. And this is the piece of furniture or the object that you spend more time of your life on than anything else.
And probably give the least amount of thought to, right?
That's right. We even did research, a while back, and we were like, hey, out of all these 8 different items we listed, which one most contributes to your good night of sleep? Sadly, sleep aids were at the top. Mattress was at the bottom.
Yeah.
And I think, with this direct-to-consumer relationship like you have with people, it's a big opportunity to shift that perspective.
Yep.
So, John, as far as mattress podcasts go, would you say Dos Marcos is at the top of your list or maybe towards the bottom? Can you give us a feel for that?
As far as of all the mattress podcasts out there, it's the only one I listen to.
There you get that a lot.
So, I would say that's at the top.
We'll take it.
We'll take it.
What I heard is, Quinn, you're number 1. That's what I heard.
I think it's the Dos Marcos, Kinsley. John, do you ever drink tequila?
A little bit, not a lot.
All right. Well, when we're together, would you indulge with Kinsley and I in a Dos Marcos tequila shot?
One.
Wait. Uno or dos?
I could probably handle 2.
As long as you spread them out.
It out.
We'll spread it out. I like to golf. I love to golf, right? And so the guys that I golf with, they're big tequila drinkers. And one time I'm like, I think I can do that. That seems cool to drink tequila. And I had a couple, and I didn't make it 18 holes. And so ever since then, I've been a little shy on the tequila.
Whenever you go golfing and you're drinking tequila, it's never and. It's always or. You either golf or you drink tequila.
Yeah. It's funny. That's awesome.
Well, hey, John, it's great to spend some time with you. Thanks for telling your story. I know that it means a lot to people here in the industry. I do have one final question, though. Your original brand that you launched on Amazon, it was called the Dream Foam?
Dream Foam Bedding.
Dream Foam Bedding. Is that still being sold on Amazon?
It is a little bit. We own dreamfoambedding.com, and so that we definitely sell some product there, and a little bit on Amazon. The industry's so small, so obviously word gets out pretty quickly. And once people found out, and Amazon, we kind of got overtaken by all the different imports, and just it got to a point where we couldn't compete. And so, the Amazon business it's still there. We do a little private label stuff, but yeah, it got tougher and tougher to compete.
Yeah, and I know that some of that has been reshored ever since the anti-dumping came across. So I think that part of the business, that kind of commodity or velocity price point business, I think it's still kind of shaking itself out to find a home.
Yep, for sure.
Well, hey, if people want to get connected to you or get in touch, what's the best way they can reach out?
Yeah, you can. I don't know if I want to give my phone number out, but John at brooklynbedding.com would reach me for sure. I'd be more than happy to pick up a phone. Anyone that wants to talk, or anyone that has any questions or wants to hear a little bit more about the story, I could tell you stories for another hour, 2 hours of stuff that just happened that would you'd be shaking your head at different things that kind of just fell in place, and we've been very, very fortunate, and we've made a lot of mistakes and bought a lot of equipment that didn't work, but then I've also bought some that has worked and done well along the way. So,
well, hey, maybe we'll take you up on that agreement Quinn just sealed the deal on to grab a shot or 2 of tequila, and we'll tell some more stories. How about that?
Yeah, for sure. I look forward to it.
All right. John Merwin, CEO of Brooklyn Bedding. John, thanks so much for being on the Dos Marcos show. And wherever you're at, hey, if you go over to fam.news, there's all kinds of other podcasts, about 385 right now that you would need to get caught up on. So go over there, check it out. Be sure to subscribe. And if you want to text us or drop us a note, we'll be happy to stick handle it to get you in touch with John. because you can text us on our podium number right there from fam.news, and be sure to subscribe and give us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get the goods. And Quinn, did I miss anything?
You didn't. And John, man, what a great conversation. So glad we got to know you a little bit. And thanks for all you're doing and the people you're employing, and the best to you and your company and the families that work for you. And keep shining that light, brother. Look forward to a tequila shot with maybe a cigar and maybe a little golf together. So
yeah,
we'll count the days.
You throw a tea time in there and I can make that, for sure.
And hey, I just, as long as we can pump the brakes, just like 2 or 3 months here, and I would be happy to come to Phoenix.
No kidding, right? Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good one, John. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, guys.
You could bounce on it. Yeah, bounce with it, bounce with it. Bounce with it, bounce with it. All right. What is a hybrid? It's like peanut butter jelly, peanut butter chocolate. Hybrid so tight, there's no way that you could topple it. Hybrid on my wrist, that's a calculator watch. We add ourselves together and we take it up a notch.
Got the airflow, yo, keep you cool as it get. Visco foam alone to make you drip sweat. Get a hybrid mattress, yes, you'll get better rest. Cool and comfortable, hybrid like a sweater vest.
You know the game, we're ahead of the sun. Cause the two of us together are way better than one. Cause I'm cool as ice
and I'm hot like a heater.
Bounce by the ounce, now we got it by the liter.
Well, you take a spring and you wrap it up right. You can sleep so smooth or bounce all night. Put two together, get a whole lot more. Get the feel of the comfort core.
You can bounce on it.
Lay back, you don't have to practice. It's the best thing to happen to your mattress. Get together to do it like I did. Everybody get hybrid.
If you want somebody to get in your vicinity, you probably want to feel a little bit of a hybridity. Foam alone, out of 5, maybe 1 star. Springs and foam, we're taking care of that lumbar. Mad back support, the best way to shack up or just get rest that won't mess your back up.
Like a hot chick mixed with a particle physicist or a mullet. Party in the back of the business. Best of both worlds like Mars and Venus.
The ultimate hybrid.
Nothing short of genius.
Keeping it loose while keeping it tight. We can make you sleep or play all night. Put two together, get a whole lot more. Get the feel of the comfort core.
You can bounce on it.
No stopping when the beat gets played back. Springs keep it popping, foam keeps it laid back. Party over here, get invited. Everybody get hybrid.
Listen, doesn't matter if your kitchen is charming when your bedroom's the most important part of the apartment. What kind of bed do you keep back there? Does your girl wanna chill on a beanbag chair? Hell no!
You need springs and foam, cause if that bowling ball don't bounce, you'll be sleeping alone.
And if the bed don't react, then you can't get low. We got that type of bounce that won't spill your Merlot.
So stick with us and you'll get rewarded.
Cause I'm so gentle
and I'm so supportive.
Hybrid is where the magic is.
And we just killed a song about mattresses.